took the wrong exit. So we got back onto the highway, and right where we would have been driving ahead, there was a car accident. And I said to my son, "Oh my gosh, that could have been us. I don't understand what's happening to me. I'm suddenly going through this emotional experience, and my right arm is just shaking." And she said, "Stephanie, I see you, another parallel you just died in a car accident."
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the channel within. I am delighted to have with me today Stephanie Kraft. Stephanie, thank you so much for making time to meet with me today. I am deeply inspired by your healing work, your energy healing, hypnotherapy, and the way you integrate soul level awareness. You mentioned that you haven't had a classic NDE, but you've had numerous spiritual transformative experiences. So I'm excited to hear more about these. Maybe we can start with life before this and these, and then we can move on chronologically, or you can go ahead and share your favorite ones.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mira. Yes. So, uh, let's see. Had a massive spiritual awakening in the year 2000. So before that, it's interesting because I was an atheist. And I wasn't an atheist until I was age 10. And or I could say I was agnostic. I was atheist agnostic. It's kind of similar. But at age 10, there was a trauma that occurred in my life, which was that one of my friends was murdered. And when that happened, for me, it was absolutely devastating, and it shattered my entire world.
I offer you condolences, at 10 to have gone through that deep trauma in losing your friend and in the way it happened also. And how did you deal with that kind of trauma at that age? And there may be listeners who will carry similar childhood wounds. And what kind of advice and hope would you give to them?
Well, thank you. That's a tough one. For me, it was extra because my mother was abusive. And so I didn't know that because when you're growing up with abuse, you don't realize it until maybe you're an adult. You don't know it's not normal when you're a child. So my trauma was compounded, and the what I had to rely on was myself. And I would say that that's true for everybody, in addition to relying on God. But I didn't have that because I decided to stop believing in that. And so then it really was only me. And I think that a lot of people who are going through trauma really feel that. They really feel that it's all on me. I'm the only one that can help myself or be there for myself. And so I went very internal, I went very mental. And my coping was overthinking, over analyzing. And what happened was I could no longer feel. And so when she died, my friend, when I was 10, within the next 4 months, my grandfather died, my dog died, and my piano teacher died. And with each subsequent death, I felt nothing and I was numb because it was too overwhelming. I was already in a state of PTSD from the original, murder, because that threw me into very strong PTSD because of it being what it was. And so to answer your question, it took me many years, until I was in my mid 20s, to actually start being able to process my emotions. And so what I would recommend to anybody, maybe they can catch it earlier than I did. I was very aware of my state. I was a very psychoanalytic child. I think it's maybe I was born that way, but I also had two parents who were therapists. Not that they taught me anything about therapy, but it was just the conversations. I don't know, through osmosis, I got it. But I was always analyzing very deeply, even psychoanalyzing. And so, what I would recommend to people is if they find that they have retreated or not even the retreat is the right word, but moved mostly into their mental body and they become an overthinker to cope, that it's important to bring the thoughts and the feelings into the body and practice tuning into the heart, tuning into the gut, the stomach, the body. What am I feeling? What am I feeling? And get it somehow, try to get it out, maybe writing or talking to somebody or going to therapy, or, there are many different ways or meditating, but getting hypnotherapy, that's a really good way. But to try to work on moving from the mental body into the emotional body, because it's in the emotional body, which is the heart chakra, the physical body, is where we can process. We can process trauma. We can process everything that happens, and we need to process it in order to heal it. We have to feel it to heal it. And I avoided that, not on purpose. It was a trauma response, but I was very disconnected. And so it was somehow I got jolted, into feeling again and being able to cry when I was in my 20s. And then that was very helpful because I had a backlog of tears that had not been shed. But that's what I would recommend. I would recommend if you find yourself mostly in the mental body, in your mind a lot, we really need to shift it into the body because, as uncomfortable as it can be and as scary as it can feel, you're not a bottomless pit. You will not be, crying or in fear or in depression or anxiety forever. Those are just experiences as you're processing the trauma. I hope that helps somebody.
Yes, thanks so much.
I guess I should just say why it was so world shattering, even though it's kind of a trigger, because it was a violent murder. Her mother actually killed her. And so I took it very personally because everybody has a mother. I was living with my mother and my father, and I didn't know if that could have then happened to me because I didn't know a mother could kill her child. And so, with that devastation, I then decided to stop believing in God. And it was a conscious decision because I thought, if something like that can happen, then there couldn't possibly be a God. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to stop believing in God now. And that lasted until about the age of 28. And but in between that time, I was very earth-based. Like what you see is what you get. There's nothing else out there. I didn't believe in anything, not even psychics. And it was actually a psychic that was the catalyst to my spiritual awakening. And so my friend convinced me to go have a psychic reading. I didn't believe in it. But when he did that, this was in the year 2000, when he read me, he read my heart and my soul at such a deep level that it just resonated and it literally like exploded my consciousness wide open. And that night of that psychic reading, I couldn't sleep. And I had an ecstatic feeling. This was the beginning of my spiritual awakening. And with this ecstatic feeling and not being able to sleep, what was going through my mind was, if he can know these things about me, then there's so much more that I did not know about. And I was actually seeing the universe with my eyes closed. I was laying in my bed, wide awake, but with the eyes closed, trying to sleep the whole night. But I was just seeing the galaxies, the stars, the night sky when with my eyes closed. It's like it literally like it just opened everything up for me. That was the beginning. And that year was hellish, the year 2000, because just so much was going on. I was having major, major health problems. I didn't know what was going on, but I kept going to the emergency room, the acupuncturist, and the naturopath, and it was just a horrible situation. And then in the midst of all of that, my father was then diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And so,
So this is in the year 2000 as well. Right.
yes. It was like the most I could, I always joke I could write 10 books about just the year 2000. But that was what was happening. There was a story though with my father that happened a couple months before we actually found out that he was sick. There was no indication that he had any health issue. In fact, he was thriving more than he had been in decades. And and I think that's something that might happen to some people towards the end of their life. I've never delved into that conversation with anybody, but witnessing what happened with him, it was like his soul knew, maybe it was like a make or break it, like it was an interesting time for him because he was really expanding and developing as a person, very much so. So it was interesting that he then was diagnosed with the terminal cancer. But before that, a couple months before that, I had an experience when I was asleep, and it wasn't a dream, it was a spiritual experience. And in this experience, I was met with his soul. We were standing face to face in the soul plane. And anybody who's ever been there knows that feeling and that knowing that here we are, not on the earthly realm, but in the spiritual realm with another soul.
So were you
And
guys energetic beings at that time and not physical beings?
yes,
Okay.
we communicated telepathically. You could sense the essence. It was as if it were my form in spirit and his form in spirit. We appeared the same as we do now, but I would say without a body. And so, my father was emotionally distant. He was a workaholic, he was a psychologist, he was very into his work. And he didn't really pay attention to my mom or us three kids. And so, in the experience, I actually expressed a lot of rage that I didn't even know I had in real life. But in this spiritual experience, the rage came out at him. And without words, but telepathically, I was saying to him, Dad, you were never there. You didn't talk. You haven't given me anything in my life as a father. You haven't been affectionate. You've never said I love you. You're just absent. You've not given me anything. You've not done anything as a father. And it was again rage. And he received that with when I witnessed him receive that, he was completely stunned. He had no idea that his emotional distance and absence had any effect on anybody. So, in a telepathic exchange like this, you get an entire download of all of their thoughts and feelings with it. He was so innocent. He was self reflecting and thinking to himself, oh, I didn't know that my behavior had an effect on others. He had no clue at all. And he felt so bad. I could see the look of innocence on his face. He was so pure and innocent and sorry. He was so sorry. And with all of that, I witnessed that, and it made all the rage and anger disappear. It just dissolved immediately upon seeing his innocence. And then I could feel the unconditional love flowing between us, that we both had now the only thing that existed between us was now unconditional love. And so that experience with his soul manifested in the real world between him and me, because 2 months later he was diagnosed with cancer. I went home to my parents, took care of him 24/7 for several months while he was dying, and we had a beautiful bonding experience. We actually had quite a few episodes of telepathy together during that time, which stunned us every time because it kept happening. So we were very connected, and no words were spoken about it. I didn't mention it. He didn't. We, he was still my dad and the same person, but he was having a spiritual awakening as well through his dying process. But yes, we didn't talk about it, but you could tell that the healing had taken place because now we were very close and harmonious.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. And then an interesting thing happened with his death. His death, I call it a conscious death because he planned the day and the time that he would die. And that week, so he planned it for a Sunday. And specifically because it was the 35th wedding anniversary of my parents. And that's a whole separate story, which I'm not going to get into, of why he chose that date. It had to do with my mother and her sensitivity around that date, and them sort it was like an agreement. But anyway, that part's separate because it's a personal story between the two of them. But the fact that he planned the date, I know because he didn't tell anybody outright. But every day that week leading up to it, he would say, yes, today's Sunday. And I would say, Dad, it's Tuesday. He had had a stroke in the midst of this cancer, struggle. And so he was operating at a different level mentally. But every day he would say, yes, today is Sunday. And I'd say, Dad, no, it's, Tuesday. And we lived in Washington, D.C. That's where I was born and where I grew up and where my parents had, their house, where I was with him. And I would say, you know, why are you so excited about Sunday? And he said, oh, the Redskins are going to play. That's why I mentioned Washington, D.C., because that's the football team. So I knew he was lying because he didn't want to say, oh, I'm going to die that day. But I knew we had a very deep connection. So I knew. And he would say that every day, today's Sunday. Well, anyway, Sunday came and he did pass. But at that time, we knew, there are signs when somebody is terminal, they stop eating, they stop drinking, they stop talking, they close their eyes, and when it's coming, at least I knew specifically when. And so he was in that state and he was in the dying process. And I told everybody, my brother, my sister, my mom, everybody, come around to the bed. He's dying. So we gathered around and held his hand and said, I love you, and had him, we gave him a beautiful death with just pouring like love. We love you, and he took his last breath, his last exhale. And so this was on December 17th in the year 2000. And the thing is that was winter time, obviously. And it usually is very cold, but it just happened to be raining that day, which is very unusual because so it was a bit of a warmer day. So it was pouring rain. And then as soon as he exhaled, the last exhale from his body, we were upstairs in the master bedroom, my parents' bedroom, and surrounding the bed, like I said. And when that last exhale happened, the front door downstairs just swung wide open. We could hear it. And that had never happened in my entire life. And that had been the family home since I was age 5. And so, nothing ever made that heavy wooden door swing open, right? But with upon that last exhale, then the rain stopped, the door swung open with a strong wind, and it was as if we were guided, just the kids. We were adults. I was 29. So my brother, sister, and I, and my brother's wife at the time, we were all like the kids in the family. We all went down. My mom stayed inside, I think, with my dad, but we all just sort of, it was as if it were like in a movie. We just all got up and went downstairs, and we were all just, in our socks. We didn't put any shoes on. We just walked outside to the front lawn, and the clouds parted. We all just stood there on the grass and we looked up. We all, it was as if we were all got, no words were spoken. We just all went out, stood on the grass, looked up, the clouds parted, and the sun burst through, shining. And without spoken word, I think we all felt like my dad's soul went out with a grand exit.
Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story. Um, I do have a question with regards to your closeness towards the end. And I read Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. And in it, his patient was able to recognize people in this lifetime, in previous lifetimes, via the energetic makeup. And also, do you believe in for the experiences that we need to raise our consciousness?
I definitely believe in that. And interestingly enough, I read Many Lives, Many Masters in the year 2000,
Wow.
right after my spiritual awakening that year. And it resonated. It was one of the awakening experiences of that year. About the clusters, the soul groups, in 2007, I was trained by the Michael Newton Institute and Michael Newton himself in Life Between Lives hypnotherapy. And so in that training, we would go off and do our practicing. So I would do a Life Between Lives session with one of the students, and one of the students would do one with me. So this was my first one that I received during the training. And during that one, the hypnotherapist asked me, "Who is in your soul group?" And my father appeared.
That is beautiful. And I was going to get to this as well, because in that book, again, the patient, she was resting in between lives. And when I read that you do this kind of therapy, I thought I would ask you about that and how is that helpful to individuals receiving it?
Well, it can be life-changing because people have a lot of questions. They want to know, why is this person so significant to me? What is going on in this relationship? Why do I have these parents, this family, this romantic, partner, children? So there's the relationship questions, and then health and spirituality and soul and work and life purpose. So people have so many questions, and this is a way to come with your questions and have a session where you're guided to, well, your soul guides you. The hypnotherapist is a guide, but we don't, but it's your own subconscious, which is the same thing as your soul, guiding you into what is important for you to know at this time. And what the main theme that comes up in those sessions is that we are on a continuation of learning from lifetime to lifetime with similar themes and similar members of the soul group who switch roles. And it's this continuation of a story through like epochs of time.
I was going to ask you about your thoughts on past lives, future, everything happening at the same time, and also to throw in the parallel lives also. And if you can talk about that, please.
Yes. So On Earth, this is a realm of space-time. So we have three-dimensional space. It's seemingly very material, and there's time, there's linear time, supposedly. That can also be altered, but that's a different topic. So this is all about quantum physics. And so when we cross over to the other side where we're no longer on Earth, we're in the realm of no time. And because that is true existence is outside of this realm. This is a realm of illusion, like a hologram. And once we shift out of it, then the rest of existence and reality is in no time. And so, as a soul that's eternal and the source of all that is, which is eternal, we can shift back into this reality of space time and come in at any time, but it's all happening at the same time because, in essence, there is no time. We're just playing. It's like pressing play on a movie. You're watching that movie play out from beginning to end. Well, that's our experience here, but you can change a channel and watch another movie. It's still happening. It's still playing at the same time. You could change the channel to another. And so most human brains or minds or consciousness can't grasp it until you take maybe a year to, or maybe consciousness has sped up to the point it might take a month or 3 weeks or whatever it is for the person to actually conceptualize it. Because the first time you hear about it, it stretches your mind and your consciousness so much, and you have to assimilate that new concept over time. But once you get it, it becomes understandable. And so I used to describe it to people as if you like look at a rug, like an oriental rug, and has all these flowers and patterns and triangles, and well, that's the Earth plane. I don't think Earth is a flat plane, but that's a different topic. But you take the Earth plane and you can zoom down in on one flower or one leaf or anywhere on it, and they're all different times and lifetimes and years. And so it's still all in existence together as the one rug, but we can visit different parts.
I really like that analogy. And, our time it revolves around our sun. Well, we are such a tiny speck in the cosmos. So I would like to believe that there is no time out there. And then when you listen to the near-death experiences talk, they there is no time there. And we are able, like you said, to linearly put it together, but I am able to understand better everything happening all at once.
Yes, and so the parallel lives would be that my soul essence, so a soul in my understanding is similar to the sun. The sun has a great amount of energy, and a portion of that energy can come into the body to be Stephanie Kraft, and that would be my higher self, would be my guidance for this incarnation, but the larger portion is the soul, and then we have the oversoul, but that's another conversation. But talking about parallel lives would be that for this incarnation as Stephanie, I can make a decision to go down this path, or make even just not, that's a big decision, a path, but all decisions can be made. And if I make this decision to turn left when I'm driving this day, well, there's an alternate version of me in a parallel reality, which is right here in the same space, but we can't see it because remember, everything's happening in at the same time, but also in the same place. Then that alternate version of me, which is on an alternate timeline, which is an alternate, universe, can take a right instead. And then that version of me is living out all the subsequent consequences of that turn. And so this is happening all the time. So there are seemingly infinite versions of Stephanie living out all of the variety of choices for the incarnation. And by that happening, then at the end of the life or lives of Stephanie, we bring all of the experience back into the soul and we evaluate it in the afterlife and we take all of the learning, the growth, the evolution, and it's now part of the soul. And that's happening for each incarnation. And I actually, most people don't see the physical with their eyes, the actual evidence of this, but I did. I was driving on the highway with my son in the back seat, and I used to homeschool him. And I also had an office where I would work. And so I would often drop him off at a friend's house and then go to my office. So there were two different exits. And I was sort of on autopilot, and I was going to drop my son off, but I took the wrong exit and I was started driving to my office instead. And I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm driving to my office. I need to get back on the highway and go one more exit to drop you off at your friend's house first." So we got back onto the highway, and right where we would have been driving ahead, there was a car accident. And I said to my son, "Oh my gosh, that could have been us." And I looked in the rear view and he said he had the same thought. You could see it in his face. So I dropped him off at his friend's house and then I kept driving. But then I had an experience that my right arm started to shake and I started to cry and I didn't understand what was happening to me. And I had fear and panic. And again, my whole arm was shaking. And I had a friend at the time who could see past lives and was very psychic and intuitive. And I just called her and I said, "I don't understand what's happening to me." I didn't tell her about what had just happened on the highway. That wasn't really in my mind, I don't think. And I told her, "I don't understand what's happening to me. I'm suddenly going through this emotional experience and my right arm is just shaking." And she said, "Stephanie, I see you, another parallel you just died in a car accident and you lost your arm." And I said, "Oh my God," because and then I told her what had just happened and she said, "Yeah, that was you in another alternate reality."
I do have a question about the shift from being atheist or agnostic to your experience in believing in God.
So back to the year 2000, I had this spiritual awakening in the beginning of the year. Then my father was diagnosed in July of 2000. And then, so I had told you though that I was very sick and I didn't know what was wrong with me. Well, once I found out my father was dying, I just dropped everything about myself, moved home, took care of him, and no longer was I a person. I was just not even thinking about myself. I was just taking care of him, which made me sicker and sicker and sicker. But I was ignoring all of that. And then when he died, I collapsed into bed, pretty literally, and I was bedridden for 6 months, fighting for my life. And it was very serious. And and so to go, here I was having just taken care of my father who was dying. And meanwhile, my mother had been abusing him very severely while he was dying. And so for me to witness that was one of the biggest traumas of my life. And that, and and me, she always abused me. But he was getting a lot of it. And then after he died, I was there with only her, and then I became the target while I was bedridden for 6 months. And she was severely abusing me. She would come into my room every day and yell at the top of her lungs, "Go live on the street," while I was just trying to breathe. Every breath I took felt like I was trying to stay alive. And so here we are again, I only had myself. And that was kind of like very much so when I was growing up. And so here I was in bed with my own mother wanting me to live on the street, and she would also yell at me for eating food. And so it was just an extremely traumatic time for me. And so I had nothing. I had no money. I had no clothing that fit me because I had lost a lot of weight. I was just living on my own credit cards. She wasn't supporting me. And so in that bed, at some point during this journey of this time of trying to stay alive, God found me. That's what I call it. I didn't find God. God found me in that bed, and I could feel it. And the feeling was when I would cl close my eyes and I would just be lying there, there was an internal vastness, and in that space within was God that I had never felt before. And it was love, and it was bliss, and it was joy. And I was simultaneously suffering physically and emotionally and mentally and financially in every way, but I was really suffering. But yet inside, I could tap into that wellspring of love and joy and bliss. And so I would go there. I would, close my eyes and go into that to survive. And it saved my life, I think, and got me, over the months in that bed. Uh, I got to the point where I could get up, and when I say get up, when during those days to go eat some food, I was upstairs and I'd walk down, but I'd have to sit in a chair and rest before I got to the kitchen. It was that severe. But I got to the point where I could get out. I left. I didn't tell her where I was going. It was like I was escaping, but I found a place to live 6 months later. But I believe that God saved my life, and that was the beginning of me believing in God again. That was the year 2000 where God found me again. I mean, that's how I perceived it. And then in about 2006 or 7, it was, I think, 2007. I hadn't yet begun to believe in Jesus because I thought that those stories in the Bible were stories and not real. And I just wasn't there yet in my belief. And then something interesting happened, which was that Jesus's essence, his spirit, embodied within me for 2 weeks. And it was so profound that I could see and feel his radiance emanating from me. And I could see it coming out of my eyes. And I really don't think anybody else could see this, which is good. But he was inside me, his essence, the whole time. And his words were on repeat in my head, my ears, the whole time. And I had never read the Bible. I didn't really know his teachings, but it turned out to be his teachings, all of the same things that we all know that he said. And it was just a phenomenal, beautiful, wonderful time. And it's really hard to describe, but that was my experience. And then I believed in him.
I love that so much. I wanted to talk with you about the walk-in. What does it mean for you, and how did yours happen?
Yes. So I believe, yes, the walk-in. This is a very interesting question because the walk-in happened in 2006 before Jesus came to embody within me. And so the walk-in was a, a portion of my soul essence, my higher self, embodying within me a part that had never been here before. And I say never, but I just mean in this lifetime because I have no idea about other lives in this way. But what happened was that this new part of my soul was now embodied in me, and I was literally looking out of my eyes with new eyes. And I had this feeling of, oh my gosh, here I am on Earth, and look at all of these humans. Oh my gosh, they're interesting. And I was calling them humans in my mind, the humans, the humans. And I wasn't one. I was not a human.
So, Stephanie, I've heard about soul agreements where one would leave and another one would come. Was yours different though? Where okay.
Yes. So there are a couple kinds of walk-ins. One is the kind you mentioned. It's that someone is going through trauma, or they want to commit suicide, or they just want to die, and on the spiritual plane, they'll make an agreement with another soul who will exchange that for the body. So the one soul who wants to leave will leave, and the other one will come in, and there'll be an integration period, and then the soul will live out the rest of that incarnation for that body, that person. Mine was not like that. I wasn't going through any trauma. Nothing bad was happening in my life. It was, I don't, I don't know why, but my soul decided, I guess, to have a walk-in experience, like a new rebirth of a person, of Stephanie. And I think I know why, because I'm a healer, and the healing that I do is very profound and effective. And I assume that I had to hold a specific vibration to do the healing work. And I think that that's why the next year or months later, I don't remember the timeline, but then Jesus came in. And for me to make sense of it, was he's acclimating me to that vibration because I'm healing and he was a healer, and I can let this energy now flow through me, and it's not going to short circuit me. I'm going to be fine. And I think that's why I had the walk-in and then the Jesus embodiment.
So the walk-in is like your higher self.
In my case, it was
In your
that.
case, yes.
It took a while to integrate, and it didn't remain where everybody else was a human and I wasn't. That it took some time, and then I felt at home again, if that makes sense.
It does. And I wanted to talk to you about collective awakening, sharing these stories, the NDEs, the SDEs, and it's helping human consciousness to raise. However, we are juxtaposed by war and still division. How do we reconcile with this rising consciousness and then the global issues that we're having as well?
Well, every soul is on their own journey of awakening. And every soul group, because soul groups are working together. And so there are soul groups who are working on the theme of peace, or the theme of healing, or the theme of justice, or the theme of truth, or the theme of love. And so soul groups come in to learn the lessons of those themes, to teach them and learn them. And so, and because we're all of varying consciousnesses, then that will be manifest in our environment. And so there are those beings who are not, they do not need to learn through war or hunger, or, starvation or poverty. There are those souls who choose those experiences for their soul lessons of growth and learning and evolution, or being a helper in those places. And so we can all choose where we're going to go, what we're going to do and work on. And those of us who are living in peace, we are working on specific lessons or themes. I don't really like to call them lessons, but experiences that are different from being in a war-torn zone. So it's really comes down to what our souls choose, what our souls want to experience, and also about our evolution and what we're working on. And that's what I surmise about that.
Stephanie, I could go on talking with you for hours. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have three questions for you. What brings you joy and laughter these days?
Hmm. For me, it's the simple things in life. I moved to the beach about 6 months ago, and for me, it's just being going to the beach, the water, the ocean, music, just little things in life like that bring me joy.
And what would you whisper to Stephanie, who's now starting off on her journey?
That's a really good question. Communicate more and express yourself. Don't hold back. You will be heard.
Beautiful. If you have one final blessing or advice to the audience, what would you say?
I would say follow your heart, follow your soul. Logic is not going to point you in the right direction ever. That's your mind, your ego. It's looking out for your safety and not your path. And so when you drop into the heart and the soul, that will guide you, nothing else.
Thank you for all the beautiful work that you're doing. And where can people find you?
My website is stephaniekraft.com, and I have a YouTube channel. I'm not that active on it, but it's also my name, Stephanie Kraft.
And you wanted to talk about the book?
Yeah, so this is a new book called The Ways to God. And I have one chapter in this book. You can find it on Amazon. And it's just stories like what I've shared with you today. And the rest of the people in the book did have near-death experiences, and they share those in the book. And I share more that I didn't share in this interview in that book.
Thank you very much. And it's been a blessing.